Dad mocked my minimum wage job, but when his company went bankrupt, he had no idea who his new boss was. You flipped burgers for minimum wage. I built a legacy. Those words stung every time my father spat them at me across our marble dining table. The table that was too big for the three of us, Mom, Dad, and me, yet perfectly sized for his ego. It was Sunday dinner, the weekly ritual where I'd have to account for my life choices to a man who'd already deemed them failures. Growing up in my father's shadow was like living in a house made of mirrors. I only ever saw his reflection. Richard Harrington, CEO of Global Trek Logistics, one of the East Coast's largest shipping and logistics companies. His face had graced the cover of Business Insider twice. Our home in Greenwich, Connecticut boasted 7 bedrooms for 3 people and a garage that housed cars worth more than most people's lifetime earnings. And then there was me, Eliza Harrington, the daughter who threw her degree away by taking a job at Burger Bite after graduating with honors in computer science from MIT. "The potatoes are excellent, Diana," Dad said to my mother, deliberately changing the subject after his latest jab at my career choices. Mom nodded silently, her eyes fixed on her plate. She'd long ago learned that disagreeing with Richard Harrington only led to frostbitten silences that could last for days. "I'm developing an app," I said, forcing the words out before I could swallow them back. It wasn't the first time I'd mentioned it, but it was the first time in months I'd dared to bring it up at the dinner table. Dad set down his fork with theatrical precision. "Are you?" Between drive-through shifts. His smile never reached his eyes, a business tactic he'd mastered for dealing with competitors. I hated that he used it on me. "Actually, yes. I work on it nights and weekends. I've built a prototype that could revolutionize how courier services operate. It uses real-time traffic data and—" "Eliza," he interrupted, voice dipped in condescension, "the world doesn't need another app. It needs people who understand real business, infrastructure, capital investment, workforce management. Things you can't learn while asking if someone wants fries with that." Mom's hand found mine under the table, a small gesture of solidarity she could offer without crossing my father. I'd been working at Burger Bite for 8 months. Not because I couldn't find another job. I'd turned down offers from Google, Microsoft, and 3 startups with impressive venture backing. I took the Burger Bite job because it gave me something none of those tech giants could: freedom to build my own vision without corporate ownership of my ideas. What Dad didn't know was that while he mocked my name tag, I was coding at night, building a small idea into something bigger, something mine. My app, Couriercraft, had already caught the attention of 2 angel investors. But I knew better than to mention that to him. He'd find a way to diminish it, to paint it as a hobby rather than what it was, the foundation of my future. After dinner, I escaped to my old bedroom, now my weekend residence, when I visited from my small apartment in the city. The room remained frozen in time, trophies from high school coding competitions, my MIT diploma hanging precisely centered on the wall, Dad's doing, and bookshelves lined with technical manuals and business books he'd given me over the years, all annotated in his aggressive handwriting. My phone buzzed with a text from Raj, my lead developer and best friend since freshman year of college. "Got the new algorithm working. Cut processing time by 40%. Still up for that 11 p.m. test run?" I smiled, feeling a flutter of excitement that Dad's dinner conversation had nearly crushed. "Absolutely. I'll call in when I get back to my place." The next morning, before heading back to the city, I found Dad in his home office, surrounded by multiple screens displaying stock tickers, logistics reports, and email chains. He didn't look up when I knocked on the doorframe. "I'm heading out," I said. He continued typing, his platinum Montblanc pen sitting unused beside an empty coffee cup. "Dad." Finally, he looked up, impatience written across his face. "What is it, Eliza?" "I'm preparing for a board meeting." I straightened my shoulders. I was hoping we could talk about my app idea sometime. Seriously talk about it. I think it could actually help companies like yours streamline operations and— "Eliza," he cut me off, his voice sharp enough to slice through steel. "Playing with code in your spare time isn't the same as running a business. You had every opportunity to join Global Trek after graduation. A real job with real responsibilities. Instead, you chose to flip burgers and play entrepreneur. His eyes returned to his screen. When you're serious about your future, we can talk. The dismissal was as clear as it was familiar. I'd been hearing variations of it since I turned down his job offer after graduation. What he never understood was that I was deadly serious about my future, just not the future he'd mapped out for me. In his world, I would start in middle management at Global Trek, spend years working my way up, and eventually take over when he retired, maintaining his legacy exactly as he'd built it. But I wanted to build something of my own. Something that would change the industry, not just inherit a piece of it. As I drove back to my apartment in my second-hand Toyota, a deliberate choice that made Dad wince every time he saw it, I thought about the code waiting for me, the team that believed in my vision, and the future I was building in secret. At a red light, I glanced at my burger bite name tag, sitting on the passenger seat. "Eliza, happy to serve you," it proclaimed in cheerful lettering. Dad saw it as a badge of failure. I saw it as a disguise, a cover for the revolution I was quietly coding into existence. What Dad didn't know wouldn't hurt him. Not yet, anyway. That evening, I stood at the burger bite counter, taking orders from harried parents and teenagers with pocket change. My manager, Tony, gave me an approving nod as I handled a particularly difficult customer with patience. Tony was one of the few people who knew about my double life, mainly because I occasionally had to swap shifts to make investor meetings. "Rough weekend with the family?" he asked during a lull, noticing the dark circles under my eyes. "Just the usual," I replied, wiping down the counter. Dad being Dad. "Still think you're wasting your life?" Still thinks I should be working for him instead of playing with apps. I mimicked my father's condescending tone. Tony shook his head. His loss. "How's the secret project going?" A small smile broke through my fatigue. "Actually really good. We just solved a major processing issue last night. The algorithm can now calculate the most efficient route for a package across the city considering real-time traffic, weather, and even construction data." "Sounds like magic to me," Tony laughed. "But I've seen you code. If anyone can pull it off, it's you." The bell above the door jingled, and I turned to greet the next customer, slipping my name tag back into place. Just another minimum wage worker in a fast food joint, hiding in plain sight while building tomorrow's technology after hours. Dad had no idea that the real legacy was just beginning to take shape, and it wouldn't have his name on it, but mine. "You think life is a startup pitch? Wake up." 2 weeks after that Sunday dinner, I made a decision that would change everything. I'd spent months refining my courier craft prototype, and it was finally ready for a real-world test. The app could reduce delivery times by up to 30% and cut fuel costs significantly. My small team, Raj, 2 other MIT friends, and a UX designer we'd found through a hackathon, had worked countless late nights to perfect it. I decided to show it to my father first. It was a mistake born of lingering hope, the childish belief that maybe, just maybe, he'd see my vision and be proud. I scheduled a proper meeting through his assistant, wearing a blazer over my Burger Bite uniform since I had a shift immediately after. I brought a tablet with a full demo prepared, complete with case studies and market analysis. "You have 30 minutes, Dad said as I entered his corner office at Global Trek headquarters. "I moved a call with Singapore for this." "Thank you," I said, already feeling my confidence waver under his impatient gaze. "I wanted to show you what I've been working on." I launched into my presentation, explaining how CourierCraft combined machine learning, real-time traffic data, and predictive analytics to create the most efficient delivery routes possible. It could revolutionize logistics, I concluded. Companies like Global Trek could save millions annually while improving delivery times. Dad leaned back in his leather chair, steepling his fingers. For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of interest. "You think life is a startup pitch? Wake up," he finally said, his voice cold. "This is elementary stuff, Eliza. Every logistics company has routing software." "Not like this," I insisted, pulling up comparative data. "Current systems don't adapt in real time or learn from." "Enough," he cut me off. "This is exactly why I wanted you at Global Trek. You don't understand the industry. You're looking at one small piece of a complex operation and thinking you've reinvented the wheel." He stood up, signaling the end of our meeting 15 minutes early. "Dad, please, just look at the numbers. I have a company to run, Eliza. I don't have time for tech demos from someone who couldn't even commit to a real career." His eyes fell to my Burger Bite name tag, still visible beneath my blazer. "Focus on taking orders correctly. That's something concrete you can accomplish." The words hit like physical blows. I gathered my things, hands trembling, and left without another word. In my car, parked in the visitor section of the Global Trek lot, I finally let the tears come. I'd spent thousands of hours on CourierCraft, poured my savings into development, and believed in it with every fiber of my being. And he couldn't spare 15 minutes to truly see it. My phone buzzed with a text from Raj. "How did it go?" I stared at the screen, tears blurring the letters. Then something shifted inside me. Something hardened. I typed back. He hated it. "Meeting over." Another buzz. "I'm sorry, Liz." What now? What now, indeed? I looked up at the Global Trek building at the logo my father had designed himself 20 years ago. Then I made a decision. Now we build it anyway. Without him. That night, I worked my Burger Bite shift in a strange state of calm. When I got home, I bought my domain name, couriercraft.com, and started rebuilding my business plan from scratch. No more seeking Dad's approval. No more hoping for his investment or connections. I withdrew the remainder of my college fund, $14,000 that Dad had graciously allowed me to keep rather than invest in Global Trek stock as he'd wanted. It wasn't much, but it was enough to incorporate and keep development going for a few months. I texted my team, "Meeting tomorrow, 7 a.m. We're going all in." When Raj called to ask what happened, I told him simply, "I'm done begging for respect. Either CourierCraft succeeds on its own, or it doesn't. But I'm not living in his shadow anymore." For the first time in months, I slept soundly, the sleep of someone who had finally cut an anchor that had been dragging behind them for too long. I was no longer Richard Harrington's disappointing daughter. I was Eliza Harrington, founder and CEO of CourierCraft. And I was just getting started. I worked double shifts. I lived off ramen. I built a team from Reddit. The next 6 months were a blur of exhaustion and exhilaration. I worked morning shifts at Burger Bite, coded through afternoons, took evening meetings with potential investors, and debugged until dawn. Sleep became a luxury. Proper meals even more so. "You look like hell," Tony commented one morning as I nearly fell asleep while restocking napkins. "Thanks," I muttered, suppressing a yawn. "Pulled another all night." "Your app thing?" I nodded. "We're pitching to a real venture capital firm next week. Had to fix some back-end issues." Tony shook his head. "You MIT types are a different breed. Most people would have quit by now." Most people weren't trying to prove their father wrong. My tiny apartment transformed into CourierCraft headquarters. Whiteboards covered every wall, my kitchen table disappeared under laptops and empty coffee cups, and my refrigerator contained nothing but energy drinks and expired condiments. "I found another developer," Raj announced during our weekly meeting. "Met her on Reddit. She's brilliant with machine learning algorithms." "Can we afford another person?" I asked, mentally calculating our dwindling funds. "She'll work for equity. She believes in what we're building." Somehow, people kept finding us, believing in us. A UI designer from London joined our Slack channel, volunteering weekends. 2 logistics students offered to help with beta testing. A retired courier driver provided invaluable insights about real-world delivery challenges. We cobbled together a company from nothing but conviction and caffeine. Meanwhile, I maintained radio silence with my family about CourierCraft. During obligatory Sunday dinners, I deflected questions about that app thing and endured Dad's continuing disapproval of my Burger Bite job. Julia's daughter just made junior partner at Goldman. Mom mentioned one evening, her way of gently suggesting alternatives to fast food. Dad didn't bother with subtlety. 8 months at that burger joint. "When are you going to get serious, Eliza?" I just smiled. "I am serious, Dad. Just not about what you think I should be." What they didn't know was that CourierCraft had secured $300,000 in seed funding. We had 3 pilot programs running with local delivery services. Our team had grown to 11 people, all working remotely, all passionate about changing logistics forever. By day, I flipped patties. By night, I built code, tested UX, and pitched to angel investors in secret. No one in my family knew. They just called me the dropout with a headset. Meanwhile, I started signing real deals. The turning point came 9 months after my disastrous meeting with Dad. An industry blog mentioned courier craft as a promising disruptor in logistics technology. A week later, TechCrunch included us in a roundup of startups to watch. Then Forbes called. They want to feature us in their 30 under 30-foot list for transport innovation. I told Raj, still in shock after the call. "That's incredible," he exclaimed. "Your dad will finally have to acknowledge what you've built." I hesitated. I asked them not to use my full name. Just EH, founder and CEO.
What? Why?
I couldn't fully explain it, even to myself. Part of me wanted to succeed, completely independent of the Harrington name. Another part wanted to keep building in peace, without Dad's criticism or attempts to take over. And maybe, a small part wanted the reveal to be on my terms, when the time was right. The Forbes feature appeared with a small photo of our team, me partially obscured in the back row, and the mysterious YH attribution that sparked industry speculation. Overnight, investor interest quadrupled. We closed our series a funding round at $2.5 million. I finally quit Burger Bite, though I kept my name tag in my wallet as a reminder of where I'd started. Tony threw me a goodbye party with a cake shaped like a burger. "Don't forget us little people," he joked. That weekend at dinner, Dad was unusually talkative about industry matters. "There's this new software disrupting the courier market," he mentioned, scrolling through his phone. "Some startup called Courier Craft. Clients are asking if we're planning to implement similar technology." I nearly choked on my wine but managed to keep my expression neutral. "Oh, probably another flash in the pan," he dismissed. "These tech startups come and go. No staying power." If only he knew that the founder of this flash in the pan was sitting across from him, eating his pot roast and biting back a smile. Courier Craft was no longer just my secret project. It was becoming Global Trek's competition, and my father had no idea. When the logistics industry shifted, Dad refused to adapt. He called innovation a fad. 18 months after our Forbes feature, Courier Craft had offices in 4 countries. Our routing technology was revolutionizing how packages moved across cities, cutting delivery times by 38% and reducing fuel costs dramatically. Major shipping companies were either licensing our software or scrambling to develop their own versions. Every company except Global Trek. "These tech solutions are a passing fad," Dad declared at an industry conference that I watched via live stream. 30 years in logistics has taught me that nothing replaces solid infrastructure and experienced personnel. Apps come and go. Global Trek is built to last. I scribbled his quote in my notebook, adding it to a growing collection of his dismissive comments about innovation. They made for painful reading, but also strengthened my resolve. During our now monthly family dinners, I noticed subtle changes. Dad looked tired. He checked his phone more frequently, his brow furrowing at messages. Mom mentioned restructuring at Global Trek, quickly changing the subject when Dad shot her a warning glance. I maintained my cover, though I'd long since left Burger Bite behind. As far as they knew, I now worked for a tech company, in a vague role that I deliberately described in boring terms whenever asked. They'd stopped questioning me about it, perhaps relieved I'd finally found something more respectable than fast food. Meanwhile, I was closing deals with international shipping giants and turning down acquisition offers almost weekly. Courier Craft had grown to 87 employees, with our headquarters taking up 3 floors in a downtown high-rise, ironically, just 6 blocks from Global Trek's offices. Another courier company switched from Global Trek to us today, my sales director informed me one afternoon. "That's the 5th this quarter." I nodded, feeling a complicated mix of pride and guilt. Did they say why? Same as the others. Global Trek refused to upgrade their tracking systems or implement any real-time routing. They're hemorrhaging clients to competitors who use our software. That night, I stayed late at the office, staring out at the city lights. Was I deliberately hurting my father's company? No. I'd offered him first look at my technology, and he'd laughed it off. I'd even considered, briefly, sending an anonymous proposal to Global Trek offering favorable licensing terms. But my board would have questioned why we were giving preferential treatment to one company. Besides, Dad had made his position clear. When the logistics industry shifted, he refused to adapt. He called innovation a fad. The following Sunday, Dad was unusually quiet at dinner. Mom carried the conversation, asking about my work. I kept details minimal and sharing community gossip. It wasn't until dessert that Dad finally spoke directly to me. "Your generation thinks technology solves everything," he said abruptly, swirling the scotch in his glass. "But algorithms can't replace experience. All these new logistics startups poaching our clients, they'll fail when the first real crisis hits." I took a careful sip of water. Maybe. Or maybe they're just meeting market demands that traditional companies are ignoring. His eyes narrowed. Easy to say when you're not the one who built something from nothing, only to watch vultures circle it. The irony was almost too much to bear. I excused myself shortly after, claiming an early meeting. 3 days later, Global Trek's stock plummeted 28% following the announcement that their 3 largest clients were not renewing contracts. Business news sites speculated about mismanagement and failure to modernize. One particularly brutal analysis specifically mentioned couriercraft as the technological disruption that Richard Harrington fatally ignored. Mom called me that evening, her voice tight with worry. "Your father's not doing well, Eliza. The company, there are problems. He won't talk about it, but it's bad." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, meaning it despite everything. "Is there anything I can do? Just maybe call him? He needs family right now, even if he won't admit it." I promised I would, but when I tried, he didn't answer. Instead, his executive assistant returned my call, explaining that Mr. Harrington was in emergency board meetings and would be unreachable for several days. The following week brought rumors of impending bankruptcy. Global Trek had over-leveraged itself on physical infrastructure while competitors had invested in technology. Their outdated systems couldn't compete with new platforms, specifically with couriercraft, though no one knew of my connection. Investors fled. Clients dropped. He had no idea his outdated model was being edged out by me. When Bloomberg reported that Global Trek was seeking a buyer to avoid complete collapse, I closed my office door and cried for the first time since that day in his office 2 years earlier. Not for the company, but for my father, who couldn't see that the future he dismissed was already here. They said a mysterious buyer was acquiring the company. Dad was furious until the day I walked into the boardroom. The news broke on a Tuesday morning. Global Trek Logistics was officially for sale. Financial analysts predicted a fire sale price, given the company's outdated infrastructure and hemorrhaging client base. Industry vultures began circling immediately. My phone rang at 7 a.m. It was Raj. "Have you seen the news?" he asked without preamble. "Yeah," I said, staring at the headline on my laptop screen. "Global Trek's on the block. Are you okay?" I considered the question. Was I okay? My father's life's work was collapsing, partially due to the company I'd built. Yet he'd had every opportunity to adapt, to innovate, to see what was coming. He'd chosen arrogance instead. "I'm fine," I replied. "It's business." "So, we're not getting involved, right?" Raj's tone suggested he already knew the answer. After a long pause, I said, "Schedule an emergency board meeting for noon." Our board was initially skeptical about acquiring Global Trek. The company's infrastructure was aging, their client list shrinking, and their technology practically obsolete. But their international shipping permits, warehouse network, and remaining contracts had value. "This is a strategic acquisition that makes sense," I argued, carefully keeping emotion from my voice. "Their physical infrastructure complements our software platform. Together, we could offer end-to-end logistics solutions no competitor could match." What I didn't say was that I couldn't bear to see my father's legacy dismantled by private equity firms who would strip the company for parts and discard the employees who'd been loyal for decades. After 3 hours of debate, the board approved my proposal. Courier Craft would make an offer for Global Trek, contingent on due diligence. We would operate through a holding company to maintain anonymity during negotiations, standard practice in such acquisitions, though my reasons were more personal than strategic. The next 2 weeks were a blur of financial reviews, asset valuations, and confidential meetings with Global Trek's board members, none of whom knew I was behind the offer. Dad wasn't involved in the negotiations. His board had effectively sidelined him after years of refusing to modernize. Mom called during this period, sounding more worried than ever. "Your father's not sleeping. He says vultures are picking apart everything he built." My stomach twisted with guilt. "I'm sorry, Mom. Maybe this is for the best. A new owner might save the company, keep people employed. They say it's some anonymous tech firm," she continued. "Richard is convinced they'll get the company and fire everyone." I gripped my phone tighter. That might not be true. Maybe they see value in what Global Trek built. She sighed. "I hope so, for your father's sake. This company is his whole identity." The day the deal closed, I sat alone in my office, staring at the signed acquisition papers. Courier Craft, through our holding company, now owned Global Trek Logistics. I was, effectively, my father's boss. No one knew yet. The press release mentioned only that a technology firm had acquired Global Trek and would announce integration plans soon. Dad would learn the truth along with everyone else at tomorrow's all-hands meeting at Global Trek headquarters. I barely slept that night, rehearsing what I would say, how I would handle his reaction. In the morning, I dressed carefully in a tailored charcoal suit that projected authority without flashiness. No burger bite name tag this time. Global Trek's headquarters felt eerily quiet as I walked through the lobby, flanked by Raj and our CFO. Employees whispered as we passed, speculation running wild about the new ownership. The boardroom was packed when we arrived, executives, board members, and Dad, sitting at the head of the table out of habit, though he no longer held that right. He looked older, diminished somehow. The past few months had carved new lines into his face. When our eyes met, his expression showed only confusion. Why was his fast food worker daughter here on the most important day of the company's transition? The room fell silent as I took my position at the podium. Camera crews from business networks set up in the back, ready to broadcast the announcement of Global Trek's new direction. "Good morning," I began, my voice steady despite my racing heart. For those who don't know me, my name is Eliza Harrington. Murmurs rippled through the room. Dad's confusion deepened. "I'm the founder and CEO of Courier Craft Technologies," I continued, "and effective today, I'll be overseeing all operations of Global Trek Logistics as its new chief executive." The blood drained from my father's face. His mouth opened, closed, then opened again, but no words came out. Around him, executives exchanged shocked glances, piecing together the implications. The mysterious tech company, the Harrington name, the daughter he'd dismissed for years. In that moment, the power dynamic that had defined our relationship for 27 years completely reversed. I was no longer the disappointment seeking his approval. I was his boss. He still doesn't look me in the eye, but he shows up to work on time. The aftermath of my revelation was exactly as chaotic as you might expect. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions, and executives whispered urgently to one another. Through it all, Dad sat frozen, his expression a battlefield of emotions, shock, betrayal, confusion, and something that might have been a grudging spark of respect. I maintained my composure through the press conference, outlining Courier Craft's vision for integrating Global Trek's physical infrastructure with our cutting-edge technology. "This isn't about dismantling what came before," I emphasized. "It's about evolving for the future while honoring the foundation that makes this evolution possible." My gaze met Dad's briefly as I said those words. He looked away first. After the cameras left, I asked him to meet me in his office, my office now, technically, though I had no intention of taking it from him yet. "How long?" he asked when the door closed behind us, his voice rougher than I'd ever heard it. How long what? I knew what he meant, but I needed him to articulate it. "How long have you been planning this coup?" I sat across from him, unintimidated by his anger for perhaps the first time in my life. This wasn't a coup, Dad. It was a business acquisition that made sense for both companies. And I wasn't planning it until Global Trek went on the market. You could have told me. Would you have listened? I asked quietly. When have you ever truly listened to me? He had no answer for that. The first months of integration were difficult. Dad initially refused the advisory role I offered him, then reluctantly accepted after Mom intervened. He attended meetings but rarely spoke, watching with thinly veiled skepticism as we overhauled Global Trek systems and retrained their personnel on courier crafts technology. "This will never work," he muttered during an early transition meeting. "You can't teach old dogs new tricks." But it did work. Within 6 months, the newly merged company, which I renamed Harrington Global, preserving both our legacies, showed its first profit increase in years. Former Global Trek employees, initially resistant, began embracing the new systems as they saw results. Clients who had left began returning. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, Dad began to engage. First with small suggestions, then with more substantial contributions. He still stumbled over addressing me as CEO in meetings, still bristled when I made decisions he disagreed with. But occasionally, I'd catch him watching me with an expression I'd never seen before, something close to pride. One evening, nearly a year after the acquisition, I found him alone in the executive lounge, nursing a scotch and looking out over the city. I poured myself a glass and joined him silently. "You were right," he said finally, the words clearly difficult for him, "about the technology, about the direction the industry was headed." I nodded, accepting this closest approximation of an apology he could manage. "How did you learn all this?" he asked. "How did you build something so significant without?" He trailed off. "Without your help?" I finished for him. "The same way you built Global Trek. One step at a time, with a clear vision and a lot of determination." A small smile tugged at his mouth. "And spite. Don't forget spite." "That too," I admitted, returning his smile. We weren't miraculously healed. He still didn't look me in the eye most days. But he showed up to work on time, contributed his decades of experience, and gradually stopped introducing me as my daughter, the CEO, in a tone that suggested the apocalypse was upon us. Today, Harrington Global powers logistics operations on 5 continents. Our technology moves everything from medical supplies to manufacturing components with unprecedented efficiency. The company employs over 5,000 people, including many who might have lost their jobs if Global Trek had been sold to less invested buyers. Dad has settled into his role as chairman emeritus, focusing on mentoring promising employees and representing us at industry events. He'll never fully admit that I saved what he built, just as I'll never fully admit that I couldn't have built courier craft without the lessons I learned watching him all those years. In my desk drawer, I keep 2 mementos side by side. My Burger Bite name tag and the business card Dad gave me after my MIT graduation, the one inviting me to join Global Trek as his protege. 2 paths, neither of which I fully took, both of which led me here. I didn't take over to humiliate him. I took over to prove something to myself. My company now powers global logistics, but I still keep that first name tag in a drawer. It reminds me where I started, and that no title makes you better than someone who's still climbing. Sometimes the strongest bridges are built where the deepest rifts once stood. Dad and I aren't fully reconciled, may never be. But we've built something together that's stronger than either of us could have built alone. A true legacy, not his, not mine, but ours. That's worth more than revenge ever could be.